how is it going to impact the next generation, or 7 generations like the indigenous people talk about. And make decisions based on that, make choices based on that. Whatever we were doing 100 years ago may not be valid today. The world has to go vegan as quickly as possible.
Like there's despondency and suffering, and there is challenges ahead, whether that's the LA wildfires, or whether it's like, huge animal suffering, or whether it's our own suffering from engaging in that process and consuming that harm.
So planetary boundaries are limits in the life support systems of the planet that you cannot exceed. If you go beyond those limits, life as we know it will die off.
Now we have that punishment. Where have we existed throughout time of the last 5,000 years, and where are we now?
In 2023, they said we have violated 6 of them.
Wow. 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries we've already violated.
We have violated. So we are in the red zone on 4 of them and orange zone on 2 of them. Okay. Red zone means if you leave it there, it's definite that life as we know it will die off on the planet. If we leave it there. Okay. So there's a time involved, meaning you can pull it back, and hopefully life can recover when you do that. There are 2 of them, we are in the orange zone. So I'll tell you the ones, and now they're saying that we have probably violated the 7th one too. Okay, recently.
So thank you everybody for being here today. It's incredibly important. That's the first thing that comes into my mind. And in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a verse, Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirvavati bharata. It's the most famous verse that most people know. And it's whenever and wherever there is adharma, divinity manifests to work on that thing. And I feel in this short life, or wherever we are, what we're doing, Dr. Rao, I would say that being with you and sharing that message and working along that line feels to me in my heart that that is one of the most important works of Dharma we can do in this lifetime. Like if there was at a time of the independence struggle in India, maybe we would be fighting for independence. Today it is climate, it is animal welfare, it is taking care of ourselves and the planet. That feels like the big adharma that we're battling against. So, for those of you who don't know, is Dr. Sailesh Rao, an incredible, kind-hearted human being, I would say. And you'll get to know him over this discussion intimately, as a friend. So we are all friends here through this discussion. I think even if we can open the heart of one person towards increasing love for all beings, then I think that would be a great service. So thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Dr. Rao's also executive producer for Cowspiracy, an amazing documentary that was produced, which is on Netflix and has really opened the minds of many people, and also sits on the US board for GoDharmic. So helps us to connect with more people. So perhaps the best place to start is, why don't you tell us and the group here and everybody that's listening a little bit about your background, a little bit about your journey, what you did, where you grew up, where you worked, and just a little bit of context so that people get to know you.
Sure. Yeah, so I was born in India, and I did my undergraduate work in India. And then I came to the US to do my graduate studies. And I was basically an engineer, a systems engineer working on hardware, making hardware go faster. That was my main forte. And I worked on the internet in the 90s.
What does that mean, you worked on the internet?
Well, the internet was a small thing at that time, So I was part of the standards committee that was designing protocols for how do you make the internet go faster. And until my work, I started in 1996. Most of the internet was analog. and the fastest speed was 100 megabits per second. And people are having trouble getting 100 megabits per second to work. So they asked me to take a look at it. And I looked at it and I said, on that cable, I should be able to do a gigabit, 1,000 megabits per second. But it has to be a digital signal processing.
So do we have to blame you for this fast-moving world and everything that we are?
Well, at that time, it was a very collegial body. We were really working on it as if we were colleagues. There was not much competition. And people took what was the best thing to do, right? So whatever I was saying was Greek and Latin to them, because I was talking about digital signal processing when they were mainly focused on analog, right? So they said, okay, if you can make it work, if you can convince enough people that it can be done, you'll have a standard. So go play with it. So that's how I started. And within a year, they realized I was serious because there were a lot of people coming to my meetings and other meetings. And so we got that to be a standard in 1999. And then Intel came and bought the company that bought my company. So I started working for Intel to make this happen. And so the first time we got the chip done, it was in 2003, and it was on every motherboard at Intel. So 150 million units got sold the first year.
Wow.
And the internet just took off because it made the connections very robust in addition to increasing the speed. So people had a better experience with the internet. Until then, people would see, these hourglass and things slowing down when you click on something. You remember that? Yes. Yeah, Netscape. Yes. Yeah. So the internet took off, and then I realized that everything had become commercialized and political, and So I was then working on 10 gigabit Ethernet, doing the same thing 10 times faster. And I was getting frustrated with all the politics that was going on. People horse trading on, I want my bit in the standard and I want your bit in the standard.
Right.
And I said, it's not going to work if you do this. But they ignored me and they continued. So I was getting frustrated. And I came home one day and I saw Vice President Al Gore talking about global warming on TV. And I was so shocked by what he was saying. I said to my wife, if half of what he's saying is true, what is everybody doing? We should all be working on this full time.
And what was he saying?
He was saying the earth is heating up.
Right.
Right? The earth is heating up because of our lifestyle.
And what was your lifestyle like when you were watching that at the time?
Well,
you were a techie.
I was a techie. I was living in a big house, and I was feeling like, my God, I'm going in the wrong direction if this is true. So I looked at. My wife said, if you think it's that important, why don't you look into it? So that's how I started. And within 3 months, I told her we have to close our company and focus on this full time.
Wow.
And
so
she
you both
agreed.
took that turn. She was happy to do that?
She agreed, yeah. And so that's how I started working on the internet, working on the environment back in 2006. Then I wrote to Mr. Gore and I said, how can I help you? And he said, why don't you come and get trained by me? So I was in the second batch that got trained to give his presentation. And so basically he was teaching us how to give his presentation, right? But during the training, I asked him, if we all stop eating animals and we restore the forest and the land that's currently being used for growing animals, can we not reverse this?
And what was his response?
He looked at Roy Neal, his chief of staff, and he said, how did he get in here?
What did he mean by that?
He didn't want people thinking about it. He wanted people to just give his presentation. So I spent the next, essentially, yes. So I spent the next 3 or 4 years trying to convince him to talk about this. Animal agriculture. Didn't work.
Okay.
So I finally walked out. And I had started Climate Healers in 2007 because my goal was to reverse climate change. How do you heal the climate? Because to me, climate change, or global warming, as they were calling it at that time, is really the fever that the earth has. And the fever is a symptom. It's never the disease. There's an underlying disease, which is the equivalent of diabetes, heart disease, and cancer that the earth has because of our actions, And until you address that, you're not going to address the fever. And to address that, it is changing our lifestyle. So that's fundamental. And he was talking about maintaining civilization as we know it. Okay, that's what he was interested in. And that means maintaining our lifestyles. So how do you continue these lifestyles? But now I think it's gotten to the point where I think it's impossible. I think even he is seeing it now, A lot of people are seeing it now, that it's impossible to continue this lifestyle and maintain a viable planet. So this is where we are now, Now we have to basically address this seriously.
Do you think people are addressing it seriously?
At the moment, they are not. At the moment, people are trying to find a way to continue the lifestyle that they have. Okay.
I was reading recently, every Wednesday I do a Bhagavad Gita sessions with groups. And we're in chapter 3. And there's this part where Krishna speaks about attachments leading to delusion.
Right.
And then that delusion leading to anger and us being lost. And I feel like when that thing that you spoke about, lifestyle, most of us are so pulled by the things that we want or that we're doing in the world that we're unable to actually look at things with a clear mind. Because the attachments are so strong. I need to go here, I need to go there. Even spiritual things can become attached, like spiritual materialism, where, I need to have the best yoga mat, or I need to have attend this particular seminar, which is going to have 1,000 people that are all going to become, So
Right.
even that is taking away from adharma, which is like the fever of the earth and like all of those. So
Right.
do you think our attachments to stuff or success or achievement of a certain goal that we might be pursuing takes away from the reality that the chart of heating on the earth is going through the...
Yeah, it's just like what was happening in the internet.
Really?
Yeah. People are, we had a rule when we go to these standards meetings. You have to take off your corporate hat and leave it at the door before you come in. Okay?
Yeah.
And we did that when the internet was still a small thing that everyone was working to improve. But once it became huge, and there was $100 million invested in 10 gigabit Ethernet, then the corporate hat stayed on. Because there was so much money involved, right? So it's the game of money that drives this behavior, this type of behavior. Because it is basically a game we are playing. We are human beings. Human beings, we coordinate our actions between millions and even billions of us by telling common stories and playing common games. Common stories, like story of money. It's a story. It's just a piece of paper with pictures of King Charles on it.
Right.
With numbers. But we give so much value to that because it's a story that we bought into. Right? And the games that we play competitive games. These are games of scarcity. These are called finite games. The object of a finite game is to win the game. So everyone is playing this game of who's the winner, who's the loser, right? So it's like a zero-sum game you're playing. Sustainability is not going to be achieved until we start playing the infinite game. So the object of a finite game is to win the game. The object of the infinite game is to continue the game forever. Where players come in and out of the game, but the object of the game is to continue it forever. Because that's what sustainability is, right? And there's a beautiful book by James Cars called Finite and Infinite Games,
Okay.
in which he says, in the last chapter, it's just one line, there is only one infinite game. It is the game that we should be transitioning towards. We are playing a lot of finite games now.
True. I think probably indigenous traditions of the world or ancient traditions, they lived in a much more cyclical way, right?
Right.
Like,
They were playing the infinite game. Right? And so when you're playing the infinite game, you have to adapt too, because the object is to continue it forever. So you have to think about how is it going to impact the next generation, or 7 generations like the indigenous people talk about. Right? And make decisions based on that, make choices based on that. Whatever we were doing 100 years ago may not be valid today. So you have to be able to adapt in the infinite game. Okay. So if you look at the current situation, and if you wanted to play an infinite game, in the current situation, the world has to go vegan as quickly as possible.
Wow. Let's backtrack a little bit. Look, I know where we want to get to, but just backtrack. Can you scare us a little bit? Like, give us some facts and figures, and for people listening, because sometimes, even if we've heard it before, we've forgotten.
Right. I can scare you. I also have facts that will reassure you.
Scare us with love and reassure us. Because ultimately, there's a battlefield. Right. There's a battlefield of dharma and adharma.
Right. So exactly. It's the same thing.
On that battlefield, there is fright, right? Like, there's despondency and suffering, and there is challenges ahead, whether that's the LA wildfires, or whether it's like, huge animal suffering, or whether it's our own suffering from engaging in that process and consuming that harm. So all of this reality is not always pretty. There is huge suffering. Gaza right now, with like people's children being blown apart to pieces and so on. So maybe we could just set the scene a little bit in terms of, some facts. So we also understand for our children, for our own self, future generations, what is the reality as you see it?
So there's a formal way of analyzing the environmental situation that we are in. And it's known as the planetary boundary framework.
Just to understand, does anybody here know what planetary boundaries is? Just could you put your hand up if you know what planetary boundaries are?
Yeah.
This is really important concept to understand. Even if we leave with one thought that we've left here, knowing what planetary boundaries are. I think it's cool.
So planetary boundaries are limits in the life support systems of the planet that you cannot exceed. If you go beyond those limits, life as we know it will die off.
So life can only exist within a certain limits of the boundaries, right? Like, if it's like a human being cannot survive on Mars without any kind of support, or in hot or cold, within certain framework, we can all understand that we can't survive. Even if we're in a desert, 120 degrees, no water, no shade, there's only a limited amount of time we can survive before. So similar to that, planetary boundaries is a small framework by which we can exist within. So now we have that planetary. Where have we existed throughout time of the last 5,000 years, and where are we now?
Well, so there are 9 planetary boundaries that have been defined that we need to stay in the green zone.
Who's defined?
It's the Stockholm Resilience Center.
Stockholm Resilience Center has detailed 9 planetary boundaries that we need to stay within.
Right.
Okay.
And they have shown, that we have. So in 2009, they came up with this framework. And when they wrote that first paper, they said that we are in the orange zone or red zone, which means we have increased the risk that life is going to die out on 3 of those.
3 out of 9.
3 out of 9. That was
in 2009.
2009. And in 2015, they said we have violated 4 of them. gone above the limit on 4 of them.
Could you say what some of those are?
Yeah, I'll tell you. I'll tell you all 9 of them. So, and in 2023, they said we have violated 6 of them.
Wow. 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries
We
we've
have
already violated.
We have violated. So we are in the red zone on 4 of them and orange zone on 2 of them. Okay. Red zone means if you leave it there, it's definite that life as we know it will die off on the planet. If we leave it there. Okay. So there's a time involved, meaning you can pull it back and hopefully life can recover when you do that. There are 2 of them, we are in the orange zone. So I'll tell you the ones, and now they're saying that we have probably violated the 7th one too. Okay, recently. And that is ocean acidification. So there are several parameters that they have identified. One is, of course, the ozone hole, the ozone layer.
Okay.
That's allowing life to continue on the planet. And we created a hole there, right? In the 90s, we discovered that there was a hole there, and then we have been closing it. And so it's a success story. We've actually started closing it, and now it is in the safe area.
Okay.
It's not in the red zone. Okay. The next is aerosols, which is particles that we put into the air, which cause animals to die of, breathing them in. So die sooner. And that they're saying we are still in the green zone. We haven't violated it. The third one, which until now they said we haven't violated it, is the acidification of the ocean. Because the ocean absorbs carbon dioxide from the air, and that carbon dioxide mixes with water and becomes carbonic acid. If the ocean becomes too acidic, then the animals that make shells cannot make shells anymore. And then they die off. When they die off, then you start a cascade in the food chain of the ocean, and lots of other animals die off. Okay, so the ocean cannot be too acidic for life as we know it to continue. And that recently they said we have just violated it. Because as you increase the CO2 in the atmosphere, the ocean gets more and more acidic.
Right.
Okay. The next one that we have violated, which is in the orange zone, is fresh water use on the planet. We have taken a lot of the fresh water for ourselves, and there is not enough left for wild animals. Wild animals are literally dying of thirst because they cannot find water to drink. Or if they find water, it's highly polluted, and they die because of that. Next is land.
Just on the wild animals.
Mm.
I think we had in our previous discussion, what was it that out of the
numbers.
96%? Is it now gone more than that?
Well, yeah.
So 96% of all mammals on Earth
is us and our
farm animals. So only 4% is left
wild animals. Now, if you look at just land mammals, it's 98%. 98% is us and our farmed animals, and only 2% is wild mammals on land. So the other 2% comes from whales and other mammals that are in the ocean.
Right, so land mammals is only 2% is gone. Only 2% are wild left.
Right.
On the planet. 98 is farm animals and human beings.
Human beings.
Everything is gone. So where do we stop? 1% or 0.5% for the children of the future will exist?
Exactly.
We don't.
Yeah. So that's actually the 9th violation. So I'll come to that. So after land use because we have taken away 91% of the land on the planet, the ice-free land area of the planet, for ourselves. Only 9% is left for wild animals. This is why their population is going down so fast. Okay. And even that 9%, we have been playing games, pretending that the forest is still there when we have been deforesting it.
Right.
Okay. The next is climate change. Climate change is not even the worst violation. It's the 4th worst violation. Okay. And that's the excess CO2 in the atmosphere, excess greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Next is nitrogen and phosphorus loading. So we are extracting nitrogen from the atmosphere, using phosphorus from the ground and turning it into fertilizer,
right,
and pouring it on our crops. And 99% of what you pour on the crops gets into the water. It's not on the land anymore. It's into the water. And that water then goes and over-fertilizes the bottom of rivers. And when it over-fertilizes the bottom of rivers, it sucks the oxygen from the water and the fish die. So you have a dead zone in all the rivers throughout the world. Okay? And at the mouths of rivers, you have a dead zone in the ocean where there is no fish living because of all this excess nitrogen and phosphorus loading. That is worse.
They can't exist in that.
Yeah, that is worse than climate change in terms of how much life is dying. So we measure it based on how much life is dying, yeah, based on these actions, right? These boundary violations. So that's worse than climate change. Worse than that is the chemical pollution on the planet. So we are running a civilization in which we are constantly running all these industrial processes, and we are pouring chemical waste into the water and into the air, right? All the waste. It turns out that the waste, chemical waste that we pour into the water and into the air is 220 billion tons per year.
Wow.
Much more than even the CO2 we are adding to the atmosphere. CO2 we are adding, what?
Is that mostly factories?
40 billion tons, yeah.
Is it mostly factories?
It's all from all of our industrial processes put together, 220 billion tons.
We've seen the state of the Yamuna River, and we've seen those images of people bathing and praying, like full of, and they're saying the river is dead past a certain point of Haryana. Right. From the Himalayas still existing from the top, but then after that.
Yeah. The fish obviously are going to die because there's so much chemical pollution. So that chemical pollution, anything that you put into the air comes down in the rain and it's absorbed by trees. So the trees are now full of chemicals.
Wow.
In their trunks. Okay, and we have cut half the trees on the planet. Okay, so there used to be 5 to 6 trillion trees, now there are only 3 trillion trees left. Okay. So that chemical pollution is actually killing more life than even nitrogen and phosphorus loading because it pollutes the water. It pollutes the food for the animals, and the animals are eating the food, and then animals eat other animals who are storing the chemicals in their bodies, so they get a higher toxic load. In fact, the highest toxic load is for human beings because we are eating farmed animals who are eating plants, and the farmed animals, we are feeding them the carcass of one animal, we're grinding it up and feeding it to the other animal. I mean, we're doing all kinds of crazy things.
It's also filled with chemicals as well, right? Like
Very
the antibiotics and other products that they're loaded with.
Yeah. So that's the second worst. And the worst planetary boundary violation is what we are doing to wild animals directly. Taking away their habitat, bottom trawling the ocean. So we deforest about 40, 50 million acres of land every year.
And it's only looking at the way, governments or the direction of politics is leading.
Right.
It's only going to get worse based on the leadership.
They want to keep growing that, right? So this is why I said the games are so important. The game of money that we play is a game, it's a finite game that needs to grow.
Right.
In fact, the architecture of the money game itself demands that it grow. And to grow that, you have to grow every little thing that you're doing underneath it, including animal agriculture. Everything needs to grow. And so they are increasing the demand, making it grow. And this is why we are deforesting so much. But we're deforesting 40 to 50 million acres of land but in the ocean, we are bottom trawling an area the size of South America, 4 billion acres every year.
Wow. The size of South America. That's how much is being scraped from the bottom of the oceans.
Every year. Every year. To get what? To get 3% of the food we eat. We only get 3% of the food from that. It's not economical to do that. The only reason it's economical is because it's being heavily subsidized by the governments.
So that's the planetary boundaries.
That's the planetary boundaries.
Now, this can be quite dense content to consume, a lot of facts, a lot of figures.
Right.
Everybody's busy, Dr. Rao. You've built the internet, you've done things, you're in retirement age, or work age post your working thing. This is more work now. I wouldn't say retirement age, but you're working more than you probably were before. But in the sense of the need for money generation for young families, for people who are spending not 40 hours but maybe 60 hours a week working, they have so many things to stress about, taxes to pay, high heating costs, high water bills, and everything else that we have to be concerned with, as well as maintaining one's health, as well as maintaining one's spiritual health, as mental health and emotional health, and family health, good environment. All of these things are also going on in this dynamic. So what's in it for me? Let's come to that, because I find that today, if you don't answer that question, what am I getting from this? If I'm getting something, individuals always looking in the world today, we're in that system, right? It's an exchange system. It's in that world, and I feel like what am I going to gain from taking all this burden on of 9 planetary boundaries when I'm already stressed out with everything that I have to do?
I'll tell you what you're going to gain. You're going to gain your health back. You're going to gain the health of the planet back. Because as we heal ourselves, we heal the planet.
Let's talk about our health. Okay.
Let's start with our health. So the American College of Lifestyle Medicine identified 8 risky behaviors that are responsible for 90% of the healthcare costs in the world.
American College of
Lifestyle Medicine.
Lifestyle Medicine
identified 8 risky behaviors.
Okay.
That are responsible for 15 chronic conditions.
So only 8 behaviors are responsible for the 15 major conditions.
Chronic conditions.
Okay.
And 90% of the healthcare costs in the world.
Wow.
Okay. These 8 risky behaviors are: poor diet is number 1, which according to Dr. John McDougall is responsible for half of that cost.
Poor diet.
Poor diet.
Number 1.
Number 1. Number 2 is lack of exercise.
Okay.
Number 3 is smoking. Number 4 is lack of health screening.
Okay. Regular health screening, checkups.
Right. No, lack of health screening. Number 5 is poor stress management.
Okay.
Number 6 is lack of sleep. Number 7 is poor standard of care, meaning you go to a doctor and he treats you for the wrong thing and you die.
Okay.
And number 8 is excessive alcohol consumption or drug use, substance abuse.
Okay.
Now, in a system that needs to grow the economy, these 8 risky behaviors are responsible for 90% of the healthcare economy. So the 8 risky behaviors are deliberately encouraged to grow the economy. They're stuck in a game. They're playing a game.
We are stuck in that game.
We're stuck in this game. So, but it's a system, right? It's a huge system. Economic system is a huge system. And Deborah Fries said, big systems cannot be changed. Fundamentally cannot be changed. The only thing you can do with big systems is to start over. Create a new game that's all about health. Okay? That's an infinite game as opposed to a finite game.
That requires a lot of faith though, huh?
No, you have to start it in parallel. Let the current game run.
Okay.
Start another game. Let's start playing the game. And then as more and more people join the game, you'll abandon the old game. That's the way it works, okay? That's how big systems change. Big changes happen this way. So you take the 8 risky behaviors and you do the exact opposite, which by the way, we can all do starting today.
Let's all start doing that.
No one can stop us from doing this.
Okay, so what are we doing? What are the 8 behaviors?
From poor diet to a healthy vegan diet.
What's a healthy vegan diet?
A whole food, plant-based vegan diet. Okay? Which is basically non-processed foods. Make your dal, make your sambar, make your curry, which is all non-processed foods, and eat that. So there is now thousands of recipes and maybe hundreds of thousands of recipes on YouTube on how to eat healthy, whole food plant. Just write whole food plant-based for any recipe and you'll get it.
I really believe in that. That has to be a direction where we move away from processed.
Yes, because what it does is a whole food plant-based diet is bringing us back to the way we were in Africa before we moved out and went to every part of the world.
When things were sustainable, when things were infinite.
Because, what would you see if you didn't have cooking? What would you eat? If you didn't know how to cook, what would you eat?
Fruits, nuts, berries.
Yes, anything that smells good, anything that tastes good. That's what you'd be eating, right? So that's what we were eating way back. And then we figured out how to cook, and so we expanded the amount of food that we can eat. So that allowed us to eat grains and things that we couldn't eat otherwise. Fine.
Once I was in the Caribbean in Trinidad, and I was in a forest, and I met a Rastafari in the forest, and he lived in the forest. And I asked him, "What do you eat?" And he says, "I just eat whatever's here in the forest, berries or roots or mangoes or something." And he said, "I've got a cousin in New York." I said, "Well, so you travel to New York? Then what do you eat when you go to New York?" He said, "I don't eat any of the food that people are eating, all of the processed food. When I visit my sister and family there, I'll just ask them to bring me some fruit, a mango or something, and I'll cut it and I'll eat that." And I said, "Well, what if they don't have mango or something when you're eating?" "Then I'm good with a glass of water." I'll just have a glass of water. And so I was always impressed with that. He didn't want to consume any processed food at all because he just wanted nature food or whole food, plant-based.
Right. That's the ideal food, right? So that's what you should be eating. And that will automatically reduce if you eat the natural diet for you, your body automatically becomes healthy. Okay? So it loses the excess weight and so on, right? Second is from lack of exercise to regular exercise. So you can do like sun salutations or whatever, something regularly, do it every day. Okay? From smoking to conscious breathing. Pranayama, yes. Right. From lack of health screening to regular health routines. Sadhana.
Amazing.
Sadhana. So do the same thing over and over, on a daily basis. From poor stress management to meditation and awareness. Now, if you do these 5, you'll automatically get good sleep, which is number 6. From poor sleep, you'll get good sleep. Then from 7, it's a poor standard of care. The opposite is a sense of purpose. And I say that if we don't get a sense of purpose now, I don't know when we will. Because the planet is screaming at us saying, "Take care of me." So we have work to do. We have to stabilize the life support systems of the planet and maintain it forever. So you have to start playing the infinite game. So we have a lot of work to do to start working on this infinite game, creating the infinite game.
There's purpose for that, right?
Absolutely. There's
a purpose is dharma.
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the same.
It's dharma, obviously. And from excessive alcohol consumption to contact with nature.
Beautiful.
Contact with each other. Because when you are in a community, you don't need to have substance abuse. You won't abuse substances, right? So this is why community is so important. So
Satsang,
yeah. So these are the 8 healing habits, healing actions that we can all adopt today. There's nothing no one can stop us from doing that. And when you do that, you walk out of the system. You walk out of the system because you're no longer going to be sick. So I say the first step that we all need to do.
It is actually like a form of satyagraha, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
It's a form of not purchasing those things which are enslaving us.
Exactly.
Or not engaging in that process, like by choosing a different way.
Exactly, yeah. So it's stepping out of the old system and saying, I'm now going to work on this new system.
Beautiful.
Right? So the first step, even in an emergency on a plane, they tell you to put on your own mask first before helping others.
And I consider this actually, for all of us that are listening and present and being this this is not just social action for outside in the world. This is inner social action.
Exactly.
That if we do these basic core principles, we are actually already doing service for the world.
Yeah.
Because we are just changing that which we are doing for ourselves. So it's for self and world in inner and outer social action.
Right. You're healing yourself, and simultaneously you'll start seeing the world around you heal. Around you. So it is. So this is the first step: self-health. So then the next is rewilding the planet. Basically, if everyone goes vegan like this, you will release 40% of the land back to nature, as well as the entire ocean back to nature.
But would we really, like, if everybody goes vegan, like, maybe Donald Trump and Elon Musk want to turn everything into Riviera or new casinos or something different?
They will have a hard time doing it, because basically what happens is, right now, only 1% of the land is built land.
Okay. 1% of the planet's land is only built. I didn't know that.
Yeah, only 1% is built land. We think we are huge, no?
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact,
I once heard that we could fit the entire world's population on Isle of Wight.
I was saying London.
In London, Isle of Wight is even smaller, huh? Yeah. Easily in London.
Yeah, easily in London. So we are not that big,
Sure.
It's just that our consumption is driving it. So 1% is built land. 19% is unused land. It's basically deserts and mountains and so on. And a lot of the deserts were caused by us. We turned forests and turned them into deserts.
Right.
Okay. 22% is monocultured forests. They call it forests, but it's really monocultured forests. Same pine tree over and over, or the same teak tree over and over, because it's being used for timber or paper or something like that. So wild animals cannot live there. Okay. It's the same tree over and over.
No biodiversity there. It doesn't allow that.
Yeah, it's taken away, right? Only 9% is biodiverse forests.
Wow.
Okay. And even that, I believe, has been overestimated, because I see satellite pictures and they classify certain land as forest, and it's been deforested, really. Because the UN has a rule saying any 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer grid with 10% tree cover is still a forest grid.
Could you repeat that?
Any 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer grid with 10% tree cover is classified as a forest grid. Okay. So people are coming and deforesting 90% of the land and claiming it's still a forest. These are the games we play, It's because we are playing finite games. I'm a winner if I do that. I conned you. I conned the UN, right? This is the kind of games we play.
Beautiful.
Right? So 9% is forests. 37% is grazing land for animals, for our farmed animals. And then 12% is cropland, and half of the crop outputs is used to feed animals.
50% of all crop output in the world. So all that effort to grow the crops goes to feeding animals.
Half of it goes to feed animals.
Well, while people in the world are starving.
Starving.
I think we had a statistic just right now. Was it 800 million people?
Yes.
800
million people are hungry.
Are hungry in the world, and we take that food to feed to animals for dairy or for meat.
Right. There are 40 billion animals that we raise who are getting well fed.
40 billion animals.
Right.
Well, 890 million, nearly a billion people on Earth are
hungry.
Yeah.
And 9 million people die of hunger-related causes every year. But what is worse is that 30 million people die of excess nutrition.
And I think India is going that direction as well.
Yeah.
It's going from malnutrition to obesity.
Obesity. Yeah. There are a lot of both of them happen at the same time. There's malnutrition, people are dying of hunger, and a lot of people are dying of eating too much, eating animal foods and rich foods. So basically, we have a system that's encouraging this. This is why you cannot blame people for that, because we are deliberately telling them, hey, eat this. We lie to them. We tell them in school that protein is only found in animal foods.
Let's open it up a little bit for people to give their thoughts, views, and also fears. And, I think some people are just genuinely, Dr. Rao, concerned about their own health. Like if I don't consume dairy, I might be vegetarian. I consume dairy. Like people have been consuming dairy in India for 1,000 years, 2,000 years. It's a part of the even culture that's become, in some parts even, celebrated spiritually. What about, let's talk health first. If I go vegan, or if I take out all animal products from my diet, what are the implications for my health? Is that a question that some people may have from a personal perspective?
Yeah, sure. So the only thing you need to be concerned about, one main thing you need to be concerned about is vitamin B12.
Okay.
Vitamin B12.
Why do we miss vitamin B12 by going vegan?
Because we are the only species that washes its food before eating.
So if we don't wash our food, will I get B12?
You will if you go to a place where there is good soil.
Okay. Not many of those any left.
Yeah, not many of those left. Yeah. This is why even animals or farmed animals are being fed vitamin B12 supplements today.
Really?
Yeah, in their feed. So why are we giving it to the animals and then eating the animals to get vitamin B12? We might as well take the supplement ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So that's one main thing.
Okay.
Because soil bacteria is what makes vitamin B12, and we don't normally get it in our food.
Does anybody else have any questions on health? Like, anybody, any thoughts, views on health specifically? Feel free to jump in. We can be a bit interactive now and just discuss. So there's no doubt that,
I think we're trying to justify veganism for good health. If we look at the statistics as they are when we're talking about healthcare, even with what you consider healthy food, which is non-vegan, but health with all the innovation and advancement, can we say that it's a healthy population? I mean, can we say that the current food is actually making anyone healthy? What I'm saying is the question to need to justify veganism.
Right.
Why do we need to do that? But it's evident that the current situation and current healthcare status, with all the comforts in foods, is still having an issue with health statistics, as you've just gone through.
Right. Yeah.
So do we need to question whether veganism is a healthy option? I mean, I think there was a village, I think down in your side in America, they have like a village of people who are vegan, or the oldest surgeon or something.
Oh, Loma Linda. Loma Linda, yeah, the blue zone. Yeah.
But they're not in vegan, though, are they? They're largely vegetarian.
There's a lot of vegans there,
Yeah.
but yeah, largely vegetarian. And but they also, they have their own hospitals and they take care of themselves.
Yeah.
Very
So probably covering a lot of the fact
Right.
they exercise regularly.
Right.
They
Yeah.
have their own prayer groups and satsang.
Right.
A lot of community-based
Right.
activities.
And they have a lot of centenarians, people who live over 100 years. Yeah.
But the reason why I asked that about health is I genuinely feel that people who are concerned for the earth, concerned for nature, still feel that for their own personal health, they'd be lacking something if they went this route.
Because that's what the system has drilled into their heads. Protein is only found in animal foods. And in reality, you measure the amino acid content of foods and you see there is every amino acid in every plant food. This is why elephants are able to eat just leaves and grow so big. And we don't even think about it. We say, how come that is able to grow big without protein, without animal protein? Because look at all the herbivores on the planet.
So can I just ask regarding vegetarianism and veganism? Because we've got two sections in our house. Like I said, my husband's a vegan. And me and my daughters are not vegan, but we're vegetarian. So I don't eat eggs, for example. And whenever he tries to convince me to become a vegan, I always say to him, well, Lord Krishna used to eat makhan and butter and milk and all that thousands of years ago. So what's wrong with that? I love my dairy. I don't eat eggs, like I said, but I do eat my dairy, milk and all that. And he's always got another argument about like what you just said, live animals and all that. But is that really a sort of, how do we justify that Krishna himself used to eat dairy? Right?
Well, see, Krishna did a lot of things. He also lifted a mountain with his little finger. No one does that. No one takes that literally. We know it's symbolic. It's a symbolic story, which means that if you have faith in Krishna, he will shelter you from the trials of life. He danced on the hood of a 7-headed snake, Kaliya. No one does that. They don't even know. Is there a 7-headed snake anywhere? I've never seen one. It just means that he overcame the 7 chakras. He opened the 7 chakras. So he overcame fear, guilt, shame, grief, lies, delusions, and attachments. And he became enlightened. This is why he's playing the flute with 7 holes in it. Now he likes butter. Why is that literal and the other two symbolic? In fact, the milk is the fluid mind that has doubts about God, to which you add the thought of God and you let it curdle and you churn it, you'll get butter, which is the solid mind that has no more doubts about God. It's the mind of a devotee. And Krishna loves the mind of a devotee. He loves his devotees. When you take that butter and you refine it, you get ghee, which is a refined solid mind that has no more doubts about God, which is an enlightened mind. This is why we use ghee in our arati. Okay? So it is meant to be symbolic, taken symbolically. Now, it signifies enlightenment using ghee. What is enlightenment? Enlightenment really is seeing things as they are. And if you really see things as they are today, that ghee is highly contaminated. That butter is highly contaminated. With hormones, with chemical pollution, you name it. It's being accumulated in the cow's body and it's coming out in the milk, and we are collecting it and concentrating in butter. So it's highly contaminated. Are we offering dioxins to Krishna when we do the arati? We shouldn't be doing that, right? We shouldn't be doing that.
And you know, when we first started Go Dharmic, one of the first campaigns we started to work on was animal farming, and trying to work with dairy farmers to produce a system where they didn't kill any cows. There's one small project in the UK called Ahimsa Dairy that doesn't at least kill the cows.
Right.
There's only one project in the whole of the UK that doesn't kill,
Right.
and that was never able to scale or become sustainable.
Exactly, because it's just too much. Right?
It was too much.
Right.
It was, nobody was willing to pay for it. Firstly, like most people are not willing to part with their cash for their ethical position, and essentially we're offering blood. We're offering suffering. If we're taking that dairy and we're offering. This is the way I looked at it. So like I started to go around to all of the temples in the UK and say, don't offer abhishekam of milk. So they were, pouring milk over the shivling and taking that milk. But where was the milk coming from? It was the cheapest form of milk they could buy from Tesco's, which came from factory farms where thousands of cows stored, standing in a thing. But I also would say that this is perhaps, somewhere where I have a slightly different view on things. We all have different spiritual views. So every school of philosophy will see things in a different way. Like some people will see the stories of Krishna as absolutely literal and true. That exists exactly as it is. For me, that's okay. Some people will see analogous kind of analogies through them, and take stories and find ethical reasoning and meaning, and that's also okay. I believe you'll come to the same place. Once you apply the teaching of Dharma or Ahimsa or non-violence or whatever, you will ultimately, Krishna says in Gita, 18th chapter, Itite yana makyatam guyat guyataramaya vimrishyeta, says, yata ichasi tata guru. Now do what you want. Here's the wisdom, here's the teaching. You act according to what you see fit. So ultimately, I believe each one of us, when we apply the wisdom, we'll come to the same place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether you look at it, okay, this is literal truth, this is analogy, this is spiritual truth, whatever you look at it, however you describe it, the truth is always the truth.
Yeah.
So that application of it in today's age and this time period, if Krishna did something, doesn't mean we can do that. We have to once ultimately apply the teaching of non-violence to the predicament, and as apply. See, the thing is, they say, I love many schools of Buddhism have this idea of engaged Buddhism, where you take what the Buddha said and now you engage that teaching in the real world. I feel that the engaged Dharma is this, like taking what we learn from texts and then applying it with our own senses and mind in what we know is truth. The planetary boundaries are being destroyed. How do we fix that thing?
Right.
This is applying that. Sorry.
Yeah, that's where the Yuga Dharma comes in. It's what age are we in? And for this era, what is the right thing to do? Yeah, Yuga Dharma. Yeah. Yeah, because we have Swadharma, Kula Dharma, what's the right thing to do for your family? Swadharma, what is the right thing to do for myself? Yuga Dharma is where, it's no longer the same era that Krishna was in. He lived 5,000 years ago now. So the stories were from 5,000 years ago. And it's a different era now we are in. And finally, Sanatana Dharma is what is the right thing to do from compassion, love and compassion.
We're just having that conversation on the way in, isn't it? So with what you were saying in terms of question of applying loving welcome, from the studies, also vegan, from Gita, in line with this, because with the actual story, it's not just the literal. Krishna Bhagavan was everything. So physical, real, metaphysical, symbolic, everything he would do would be a reflection of a truth, universal truth. But as we don't see it that way, Krishna Bhagavan was breaking the trade, the commercial trade, from the village going to guns. But they don't look at that. He was breaking the pots because his cow friends were being overworked to take the market to the king. And that's why he was breaking that trade. And he was the first activist to stop the commercialization of trade. So when that time when Krishna Bhagavan was stealing the milk of the ghee and the market, he would give it to his friends because it goes to the calf first, then to the youngsters of the village, and then to offer to ghee. The ghee would be something worth offering because the Gomata gives it out of love, and she gives it because you look after her and she looks after you and you're the family and she lets you touch her, and she offers and then we offer that as a symbolic of love. But we weren't doing that. So that's in terms of that particular thing. If we want to look at the stories, but we have to think about what was he doing, and are we actually taking the milk that's gone to guns now? Are we actually putting it back into Guns's pocket? Because exactly is what's happening. And then we're putting that and offering that to Krishna Bhagavan. Doesn't make any sense.
So I think I just want to pause on that area because you can get into a whole of endless and I think you can get into endless discussion saying who did what, when, and how. I see it with many spiritual teachers that this teacher did this, so we should all follow that. But actually, then should we not apply with our own mind and senses the Dharma? Yeah, in a whole and the whole picture, like that story of the elephant, like with the blind men touching the elephant. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, the true position is that we are blind. We don't have that. Upanishads would say that, if you think you know, you don't know.
Right.
The Kena Upanishad is that.
Yeah, so just regarding healthy food.
Yeah.
I know it's vegan or vegetarian. I'm also even vegetarian. I love my dairy as well. That's a different story. Mm-hmm. Now is milk coming where and whatever. But main other thing is as you mentioned as well, because now is pollution is all the tree as well goes on.
Right.
So even if we like eating a wholesome food as well, only plant-based, but still, is it really healthy? Or
Good question.
Good question. See, what happens is the chemical pollution comes down in the rain, and it's absorbed. It's in the water, and the roots they suck the water from the ground, and as they take the water through the roots, they filter it. So every step of the way, the tree is filtering the water. By the time it gets to the fruit, it tries to be as pure as possible. Okay, that's its purpose, and it's storing all the chemical in the trunks. Now, if you eat the whole plant, you're going to get the pollution. Okay, but if you eat the tops of the plants, you're going to minimize the pollution. But what are we feeding our animals? the entire plant. Okay, we take the crops and the crop residues, feed it to our animals. So they are getting the maximum pollution. And they store it in their bodies, and they produce more pollution in their milk than you could consume in a year.
Okay, yes, yeah.
Right? It's like a factor of 100 increase that happens.
And like other thing is as well, like is in like big city and things is not possible everything as like I mean might be possible, but it's like very difficult to manage to, because even fruits or anything if you buy from supermarket is not like a fresh as it is as been said like to buy and eat
Right.
straight away, because there is also storage and long term
Right.
and even all the packed food or tin food. We try to minimize that, but still I mean health purpose like we have to think more about it.
You know, the good news is nature has given us abundance today in order to solve our problems. So we have bananas available in London in February and March. It's impossible, right? 50 years ago, we wouldn't have had that. So we now have access to plant foods everywhere. We also have access to animal foods everywhere. Now it's up to us to choose. Like he said in the 18th chapter, Krishna Bhagavan said, I've told you everything you need to know, but I love you so much that I set you free even from me, and you're free to choose. This transformation is about love, not fear. So it's about all of us wanting to do this on our own. So it's going to be a bit messy because of that. It's not going to be top down, people telling you what to do. We have to do it ourselves.
And I think that's a really important point. When we're coming together, friends, to try and apply Dharma in the best way that we can, with a real earnest intention, even people that we greatly admire, organizations that we greatly admire, won't be assessing this at that level. So it's a deeper level of application that we're trying to get these principles and really meditate upon them, looking at the whole earth, looking at all of the challenges that we face, and even people that we admire might not be contemplating all of those things in the same way. So it might be actually, it wouldn't ever be going against somebody who's doing something really wonderful, but it might be doing something different, which is different for this moment and in this time. And that might mean, moving in a slightly different direction. But what I believe is that it's actually, our goal is to reduce harm, non-violence. So if it's to reduce harm to ourselves, reduce harm to our families, our loved ones, reduce harm to animals and the earth and the climate, then it's not going against Dharma in that way. So I think sometimes people might look at spiritual communities that they're a part of, or teachings, or organizations that might not be practicing this exact thing, and then say that, well, I need to follow this because I'm part of that. But actually here is, I think, it's a deeper application of the same thing. And other people just might not be at the same place. So I think we all have that desire to be part of something.
Yeah. You're part of something great, actually. You're part of the greatest transformation in human history, which is happening right now. Okay? So veganism is basically the West saying to India, you were right when you said ahimsa paramo dharma. So they're adopting it, and it's coming back to us. So it's the same thing. It's ahimsa paramo dharma.
Sorry, in India when we were there recently, it's really, really difficult to get vegan food because mostly everything contained either butter, ghee, or yogurt.
Or paneer.
Everywhere we went.
I know. You know why?
Because my husband's a vegan, we found it really tough actually.
Right. I mean, I've been there. I was there for 3 months. And I discovered the reason it's that way is because the Indian government reduces your GST, general sales tax, on a product if it contains milk. They want to promote milk. So everybody is sticking a little bit of milk in everything so that they can reduce their GST.
But also I think there was like a huge wave of years where, everybody who was vegetarian had an obsession with paneer. So almost every time they would go out to eat, there was paneer in almost every dish. like no variety of it, at all. So like green vegetable consumption is actually quite low when we were in India, when we're traveling, even in like up in the Himalayas when we're traveling. It's actually not much spinach consumption, or kind of they eat a lot of potatoes or wheat and things. So when you're talking about whole food, plant-based food, I think when we read about a lot of the areas of Ayurveda would kind of use herbs and plant-based products to great degrees, and probably we need to bring that back more of having more biodiversity in our diets.
Absolutely.
Like probably just one generation back and we were eating 3 or 4 different types of grains versus now it's just wheat alone. So I think what do you think about biodiversity? Because the plant-based kingdom is huge.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But we only consume a very...
I know. Yeah. Even the University of Minnesota has 11,000 plant foods in its database.
11,000 plant foods.
In its database, where they're measuring everything, how much protein is in each one and so on.
What about processed food? I don't know. Has anybody else got any questions with this?
I just wanted to bring it back to the beauty of the internet is so much so that you can transport yourself into a dairy farm, right? Literally without going there. And when I've had, discussions with other people about what happens on dairy farms, slaughterhouses, whatever, I just tell them, look, you don't need to go there. Just look at what's happening. And as soon as they see the baby male being shot in the head, that was enough for so many people to say, actually, you know what, forget the pollution side, health side, this is enough for me. I can't see babies being killed, and that was enough. So bringing it back to like motherhood. So I try and meet people where they are. So for some people, motherhood's everything, right? Like the love between the mother and child. Like if you separate that, and if you kill the baby, and the grief that we cause, that would be enough for anyone to think, okay, that's enough. But for some people, they don't care. So then it's the health side or the financial side. And with every angle, you can bring it back to veganism and say, look, now it's not just about the animals, but even if they didn't care about that, it's about our survival. So you can bring everything back to our own survival, and then what can be more selfish than that?
That's a good point.
I had something slightly away from diet and eating habits, more on the fact that you said 2% of biomass, 2% or 4% of biomass in the world is wildlife, and it's getting lower, so it's implying that there's an underlying issue with the extinction of animals. And I want to take this question towards having animals like cows or pigs in farms, whether it's organic farms or unethical farms. But many people argue that they can't survive if you release them in the wild, they'll go quickly extinct. Which I wonder what you see. Would that be an issue if we stop all farms and we said release the cows and then they go extinct? How do you see that as a good thing, a bad thing, or do you think it won't happen? Or
well, the first step is to stop impregnating them. Stop bringing them into the world. Okay, so it's not. They are not having families themselves. It's a process. This is the ultimate abuse of the feminine that's happening in animal agriculture. We are literally, impregnating them and getting them to have babies at will. We have to stop that. If we stop that, the whole process ends very quickly.
And do you see it as a problem if we no longer see cows? Let's say in 20 years, you no longer see cows.
You will see a few cows in sanctuaries, and you may see them being rewilded back. It's a rewilding process we are doing, right? What were they before? We turned them into domestic animals. They're aurochs. So they knew how to survive in the wild. So we have to help them get back to that. Just like, so we are basically restoring the forests and the wildlife that used to be there on this planet a few hundred years ago, before we did all this. That's the goal. Why? Because that system was stable. You could maintain that temperature as long as you want. So since we are playing an infinite game, we need to be bringing it back to that stable state.
I actually like the idea of what you said about sanctuaries, and even this where we're developing in the Himalayas. The plan is to keep cows there, domesticated cows which are there, but not to milk them.
Right.
Just to take care of them and have them as part of the family. And, people love to be around them and to take care of them in that way. That sanctuaries of domesticated animals can still exist, just how people in this country take care of dogs with so much love. If you
Right.
wanted to talk to someone in the UK about love, you could talk about dogs, and they have a great,
Cows will give you manure as well, right?
you can use that for the farming, and you can take care of the
Right.
land, in that way. But
If the grazing land was freed up,
Right.
then they would rewild and they could live there, right?
Mm.
'Cause you said how much percentage of that land is
Well,
37?
37% is grazing land, but we need to bring back 3 trillion trees on the planet
Right.
to restore the biodiversity, to absorb the carbon and so on. Yeah.
Quick one.
Yeah.
So since 2010, and as far as I'm concerned, I've heard about veganism and people turning vegan, and I've put a lot of effort myself,
Mhm.
explaining people and serving them vegetarian, vegan food.
Right.
I was wondering, in the last 15 years, have we seen actual change, or is just very little? I'm just from a analysis point of view, I will not be disappointed if it's not big change.
No, it's changed a lot. But of course, the industry has been fighting back. Industry has been misinforming people. I mean, there are all kinds of things going on because they're desperate. They want to continue their system, right? But it has increased. The estimate, according to Statista, is like 280 million vegans on the planet. But I think Statista has overcounted Indians. And so I really think it's around 200 million vegans, which is huge actually. 200 million people who are conscious vegans on the planet. And there are lots of unconscious vegans. Because people who are in villages, in poor countries, they're not eating meat. They're eating mostly whatever they can grow. I go to a village in India, they're all vegan. They're milking the cow and selling the milk. They're not eating it themselves.
Doctor, also a lot of time you see, like for example in India, like as a country, killing of cows must be impossible, and everyone knows that.
Mm.
Even the current leadership, which is BJP led by government of Modi, but things doesn't change a lot actually, and
Right.
is it impossible? And like I'm sure what you have discussed today in Britain is aware. The government must know about this.
Right.
So where do we stand? Don't they see the problem as big, or
Yeah,
they are protecting the roles, or
right.
what it is?
See, big systems don't change like that. Cannot change. So you're just changing the actors, but they're playing the same role. You put a different actor there. So they're playing the same role. Basically, it's like a huge factory. Think of it as a huge factory, and all these government officials are managers of the factory. That's really what's going on. Okay, and it's going in this direction of growth above all. We keep talking about economic growth. Even when your consumption is already 5 times what the planet can support, they still want to grow. Right? So this is why it's a finite game you're playing. Who's a winner, who's a loser type of game. And we need to transition from that to an infinite game, to the infinite game. And as Deborah Fried said, you cannot do it within the system. You have to start over and build another one. Yes.
My question was along the same lines. It's hard to not feel disillusioned
Hmm.
by the direction that a lot of governments and policies, especially coming from the US, are going in with regards to climate change, with this idea of being a little bit more regressive. Have you had success in connecting with certain governments, certain people of influence to not necessarily change their mind? Because as a lot of what we've been talking about today is meeting people where they're at, but helping them to see that even if they were to choose 5 of the things you've listed as ways to change their own health, their self-health, to make a better place for the rest of the world from a climate change perspective, have you found that there are people who are in places of power and influence that have been receptive to those ideas and are willing to implement? And do you have suggestions on how perhaps some of us who don't ever want to feel disillusioned by the idea that it's too late to do anything could go in and have those conversations and really make an impact?
Yeah. First of all, it's not too late to do something about
Correct,
this.
yeah.
Okay? And I know that based on evidence. I'm not saying it straight out of the I'm not saying it out of faith. I'm saying it's based on evidence, factual evidence. The oxygen levels in the atmosphere has not decreased by much. It's only decreased by 0.06% in the last 30 years. Okay, so nature is still functioning. Okay, and the CO2 level in the atmosphere is still going up by only 2.5 parts per million per year, which means we haven't yet triggered some of these major CO2 bombs on the planet. So the Earth, nature is still working fine. If we now transform and start helping her, it's easy for her to solve the problem. Okay. Now, how about the leaders? This year, in the Economic Survey of India, the chief economic advisor basically said it's time for everyone to convince their friends and family to go vegan. The time has come. He said the time has come to convince everyone to go vegan. And he actually quoted numbers that were in line with what I'm saying, meaning he has studied it, or he has understood the impact of veganism on the planet. And the Danish government is now promoting plant-based subsidies. So they are now putting their money where their mouth is. They're actually paying farmers to grow plants as opposed to grow animals. So these are two examples that I know of recently that are in the right direction, which gives you some, yeah. So it's not too late. I see that nature is the perfect system design. And nature is working through us. You're part of nature. You've always been a part of nature. And she's going to tell you when you're going to change.
I think nature will be okay.
Oh, yeah.
It's us that we have to worry about. Mother Nature will take care of the planet with or without us, right?
Well, with us. It has to be with us. Because I really believe that nature needs us. It's like she's asking us, would you like to dance with me? Because nature has been around for 3.5 billion years. Okay? She's really like an old woman. And she's saying, I don't mind, because she's at the inner edge of the habitable zone. The Earth is now at the inner edge of the habitable zone. So the Earth is going towards Venus. Venus has a surface temperature of 460 degrees. Nothing lives on Venus. So the Earth is sort of at the inner edge, only 1% away from the inner edge, 0.01 AU from the inner edge. And if we dance with her, she can get at least another 100 million years of life on the planet. Eventually, the Earth is going to be engulfed by the sun. Anything that is born eventually dies, right? Which is true of planets as well, life on planets as well. So, but she made us get out of Africa, go to every part of the world, start heating up the planet. We have done everything we need to now consciously become a climate regulating caretaker species of the planet. As soon as we admitted that we are changing the climate, we are responsible for the climate. Right? And so if we now take our responsibility seriously, there's at least another 100 million years of life left on the planet.
That's worth fighting for.
That's worth fighting for. Because it's 1% for every 100 million years. The sun gets hotter by 1% every 100 million years. And so that's why I say 100 million years, yes.
Dr. Raji, thank you very much for your talk. I learned so much from you today. I'd like to ask a question in the sense that one small anecdotal point is that Mother Nature, she has a kickback as well. So we've seen with the forest fires and things like that. If you don't behave, she may be old, or that can be debated, but she can kick you as well. So you've got to behave
right.
in a certain respect. And the question I wanted to ask you to learn from you is what you think about agro-business in the sense that from a health perspective, because you've got policy, which is widely talked about, and on the other side you've got innovation, which is what you started your talk with the internet, which I found really inspiring. So I wanted to ask you in terms of now you're seeing a lot of like the far end of it in terms of having hydroponics in skyscrapers and all that kind of stuff. So get your take on what, moving towards that direction, what your thoughts are on that, as opposed to like the Gandhian philosophy of the village life.
Absolutely. So there are a lot of ways now that we can grow food that we didn't know about before. So we have everything we need to create abundance for ourselves. We already have our abundance. We are extracting 6 times as much food as we need from the planet. But we are feeding 5 of that to our animals, and then we are starving our people. Okay? So now with these other technologies, we can ensure that there is no more hunger on the planet, not just for ourselves, but for the animals as well. We should be able to give them their space so that they can live, and we take care of ourselves as caretakers of the planet, right? And I don't think we'll live like this, like in London. Because London, I mean, we come to a big city in order to collaborate and figure out how to extract from the planet. That's why we build cities. In the future, it's not about extracting from the planet, it's about restoring the planet. So you will have different organizations, different ways of coming together. In which case, you may or may not need these other businesses, these other technologies to solve our problems, right? So we have to think differently. We have to just put everything on the table and say, now how do we solve this problem?
One of the things I just wanted to appeal to everybody here as well, from a Go Dharmic perspective. This week, there's probably about 14,000 meals across the UK that will be distributed to vulnerable people. 36,000 meals have come from here, from Omnom. So I think Vijay here requires a big round of applause for all that support. So please do support this place, and bring your friends, family members, and so on here, because they're amazing partners and they're helping us to do more work. But also a big part of that in the last 15 years, and this is us growing and being open together, a big part of it has been a huge volunteer network who's collecting food from food waste and redistributing that along with all of this food. Now, one of the things I'm really keen to do across the country, and it's a big project, is to stop collecting food waste, and particularly non-vegan food waste. Because in one way we're preventing food, but we are helping people eat when there's food going in the bin. Like, that is a good thing. Kids are not going hungry to school because we are helping them. But also we're justifying a system that's broken. Mm-hmm. We're allowing big food businesses to overproduce huge amounts of food, and us doing the legwork to distribute it for them at no cost to them. Right. And so they're getting away with killing lots of animals, wasting huge amounts of food that's produced, and still making loads of money while we're the Samaritans doing the legwork for them. So even in our goodwill, we are actually, also creating things. So as we do, I liked what you said, that we have to do it in a transitional way, and we have to make sure that people do it with education and from heart and from a good way at the same time. So we want all of the Go Dharmic distributions to not collect non-vegan food. But to do that, I also want to not drop a single meal. So I need a bit of help from you all to get more vegan food donations, healthy food donations, more people like Omnom that can contribute to Northampton, to Leicester, to Birmingham, to Glasgow, to all of these places where food is being distributed, and to increase that education, because speaking about it is easy. Doing it on the ground is tough. Mm-hmm. Like, vegan food businesses are struggling. 40% are closing down or facing closure. So in that situation, it's not just words or advocacy or talking about it or Instagram or anything. It's actually on the ground, making sure a kid goes to school with food in their stomach. So I hope you can all join us at the distribution tonight, or some of you, whoever can, please do come and feel that. And also, if you're able to, even if it's £1 a month, put a regular contribution in to help us enable this, in that direction. When you talk about other organizations, I feel we've got one here. Like, having this platform is already there, or is one of many that can move the needle in that direction and be an example of what is possible. And it could be, okay, do we want food waste versus do we want non-violence in that? How do we, tackle the intersection of that? And the Mahabharata would say, Dharma sukshmosti. Dharma is a subtle matter. It's hidden in the cave of your heart. It's not going to be something that's just, okay, this and this, because you change this thing and that thing happens. You add that and you add, like, just to put one quick thing, Dhritarashtra was told by Vidura, this sun is going to cause the destruction of the earth. He was told that. He said, kill the sun. Vidura said, kill your son. Dhritarashtra said, I can't kill my son. It's my son. I can't kill my son. This is going to cause destruction of the earth. It's still my son. The Dharma of the Mahabharata is showing that which one of us would be mad enough to kill our child? But it's actually giving you that it's like complex and requires deep thought. And when people just come with simplistic answers and they think, this one thing is going to wash everything, like we've got 8 solutions you've given for a holistic way to change that direction. And that's what I wanted this to be. And I think that's what it was, is that like we need to think a little bit deeper, go a bit deeper and think about it and then put into action.